open structure, the incumbent structure of teachers are going to have a difficult time in terms of making adjustments. If you have a certain amount of, emotional and professional investment in the system as it is, and you know that change will take away some of that, remove the gate, if you will.
Hello, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 1 of the EdTech Spots STEM in Education series. My name is Kezia Ford, and I am an educator and entrepreneur. To kick off our second season of the EdTech Spots STEM in Education series, we will be delving into the topic of the digital classroom. For this first part of our two-part discussion, we're going to approach this critical topic from the perspective of our educators and hear from fellow educators what their experiences have been like participating in remote learning. But before we do this and get the show rolling, I want you, our viewers, to tell us where you are from, what country you hail from, and feel free to leave your social media handle in our live chat or the comment section. Here to give us some perspective today is our first guest, Miss Sara Westhead. She's an educator, certified Google trainer, mom, and former journalist. She currently serves as the teacher librarian at the Whitney Institute Middle School in Bermuda, where she not only manages the school library, but she's also a teacher of English language arts. Welcome, Sara.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Kezia. I'm really excited to be here and chatting with you today.
Great to have you. Our second guest is no stranger to education either. She is Miss Rolene Ned. She is Vincentian born and raised, but she migrated to Barbados to pursue her studies at the University of the West Indies, CAFO campus. She is currently teaching English language, literature, and communication studies at a local secondary school while pursuing her postgraduate diploma in education at the Erdiston Teacher Training College. Welcome, Rolene. It's nice to have you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is indeed a pleasure to be here.
Yes. It's great to have you both, and I look forward to us having some very insightful discussion this afternoon. So, to get us going, I'm going to ask you your perspective on this very critical topic. What are some of the new behavioral challenges that educators are experiencing in the virtual classroom? And how do these challenges rate in comparison to the face-to-face environment?
Well, I'll jump in first. Some of the things that we have seen so far in terms of our students' behavioral changes is that in some cases, it is difficult to monitor students online simply because we can't see all of them at any given time because their cameras aren't on. We can't see them, so sometimes we're not sure if they're actually there paying attention, and sometimes we become aware that they're not there, but we wouldn't know that because we can't see them. There are situations where we notice that students, they are less enthusiastic about school in some cases. They're easily overwhelmed because of the pressures that have come with online learning, not just dealing with devices, but dealing with work that they have to do at home on their own. And because we can't see them, because we're not face-to-face with them, it's difficult for us to monitor their progress. It's difficult for us to walk around our classrooms and go to students and, check their work to see how they're doing, to see how far they've gotten, for them to ask questions if they're struggling, and for us to help them in that moment privately or just one-on-one. It's a bit difficult to do that now with the online virtual learning.
We found the same thing, but what our school did is that we made it a requirement that students had to have their cameras on when they were in online classes. So that did solve some of the problems, but of course, we still have a lot of other distractions going on. That could be lots of family members running through the house, students facing the camera, but actually paying more attention to their phone in their lap, which they can't get away with in the classroom. But the other big problem we've had is just a lack of understanding. I teach middle school, so we have 11 to 13-year-olds. And so you don't have the maturity that and ownership of your own learning. And so what the other problem we've also had is students just not simply completing work and turning it in, because they are now responsible to get the work done and send it in. If they have a question, we can't see, oh, I don't understand this written on their face. They actually have to take the time to send us an email or and ask us what is the, how do I do this? What do I do with this? Ask whatever their question is.
Great. This is a very interesting perspective here from you, Sarah, and Rolene as well. So considering all that you've been experiencing, my question is, what type of training have you had to prepare you for the new dynamics of this new teaching online kind of environment? You can go ahead, Sarah, and then I'll hear from you, Rolene.
I guess I'm blessed that I was raised by a computer geek. So I went, even before COVID hit us and we had lockdown last year, I already knew that I had to figure something out even before that happened, because I was actually facing being out of the classroom sooner than everybody else because of family returning from overseas. So I fortunately had a little bit of background, but I know a lot of my colleagues were jumping in the deep end without any life preserver. It was enough for them to be able to send and respond to an email, let alone teach online. So we've, fortunately, with my background and then also then becoming a Google trainer, I've actually been the one who's been providing a lot of one-on-one group, small group, and then also to the Bermuda Public School System training sessions on how to use the different programs and software that they can use, teachers can use in the classroom, whether it's through remote learning or hybrid learning or face-to-face.
Similarly, here in Barbados, last year, March, when we the ministry had to act quickly to determine what we're going to do next. They had initiated a few training sessions for teachers, but the issue with those sessions, as is the same today, is that the sessions are limited to about 50 persons, which is not a lot. If you think about the secondary schools in Barbados alone, there are over 20 of them, and in each school it might be over 60 teachers. So the issue is numbers in terms of how many individuals can get access to the training. But I know I would have attended a training session last April, I believe, just before the third term began with our ICT. And I believe that a lot of schools had to do that as well. But the thing that we have to do is much like what Sarah has done, is pass on the information to our colleagues, maybe even have a private personal training sessions with each other, pass on tips that I would have learned, which is something that I have done. Because I'm doing my postgraduate diploma at Erdison, I'm doing courses or doing a course that deals with information technology in education. So I've been able to share my knowledge with my colleagues as well, because I know that everybody doesn't have access to the training provided by the Ministry of Education.
It's great to hear that perspective from you as well, Rolene. I was actually going to ask you a bit about how your training has been at Erdison in helping you as well cope with this online learning environment. So I'm glad that you were able to touch on that. And I very much agree. I believe that in cases where we may not necessarily have everyone being able to attend the training, if we as educators can also pass on our knowledge to other educators as well, so that all of our students really benefit from that shared information and that no students are left behind. So a recent HuffPost article wrote that extroverts and introverts are responding differently within this pandemic. The article stated that the big difference between extroverts and introverts is that introverts recharge by being at home and they crave space to process information, whereas extroverts charge their batteries by socializing with others. So, with this in mind, and from your own observations within your classrooms, how are these personality types responding in this learning environment? And how do we as educators cope? And how do we respond to them? Who wants to go first?
I guess I can jump in first. Our students are responding very, very differently depending on their personalities. And I think that initially the introverts were excited to be at home. Those students who really enjoy their free time, enjoy their quiet time, they enjoy being at home. But I think the issue now here for us in Barbados is that they are not home alone. They are home with their families, which is becoming overwhelming for them because I've heard the complaint that there's just 20 people around altogether. I don't want to be around my family all the time, every day like this. And they're not just at home relaxing, all those different things. They are at home at school. So one of the things that I would encourage teachers to do, and I encourage my students to do especially, is to teach them to make time to for themselves, teach them to schedule their time well, so that, especially for the introverts, that they are starting quiet time and starting time for reflection for themselves, time to pause, time to unwind, do something that they love, do something they're interested in as the days go by, so they don't feel so overwhelmed. And for the extroverts, it's a lot of them, you can hear their personalities coming out in the classroom. So they're always ready to jump in the activities, they're always ready to answer questions. You hear them coming out. So one of the things that I've tried to do, which I encourage educators to do as well, is to include online activities for those students who are always ready for something to do. Include those different things that might get them going physically, and include activities that might get them going mentally as well. Those online games that we can now give to our students because we are teaching them online.
I personally am an introverted extrovert, or extroverted introvert. That's the way you say it, extroverted introvert. I recharge by being home, but I desperately miss my kids from the class, being in the classroom with them. So to say it's one or the other is definitely not entirely accurate. But the other thing that that you need to take into consideration is not just the student's personality, but students who are neurodiverse are really struggling through remote learning. My son, my 15-year-old, is on the autism spectrum, high functioning. He is definitely an introvert. Being at school all day completely wipes him out because he's constantly having to feed off of, and when he's listening and trying to take in everything, it's just draining him. But at the same time, when he's learning online, he's missing probably a third of what's going on in the classroom because he does need to see and hear and feel all of those things that are going on in the classroom. So it's not just personality, but we also have to think about those other things. Some of my kids who are ADHD started thriving. As much as they feed off of other people's energy, they were thriving in online learning because they no longer had the classroom distractions. So there's a lot of other things that come into play besides the personality.
Awesome. It's quite beautiful to hear from you guys with regards to this. I'm getting a sense here as well that in some cases it's almost like a topsy-turvy, where we're seeing some of the students that perhaps weren't even flourishing when they were in the face-to-face environment. We're seeing them come out of their shells a bit more and be able to utilize some of those same learning activities and games that Rolene mentioned to truly come to understand the concepts that they're being taught, even in the blended classroom, as well as in the online environment also. So I have a question here, playing a little bit of devil's advocate nonetheless, but I want to hear from you guys. So the number of homework activities have increased now that teachers have discovered free educational content online. I understand that school hours are shorter but the activities are too much for parents to keep up with. Some of them have jobs. So how do you as an educator, how do they as a parent approach the teacher or the school about this? And what kind of solution do you think they would be? So I see Sarah giggling, so I'm gonna let her tackle this one straight off the bat, and then you can jump in, Rolene.
I've actually heard from I have an 18-year-old son, and his boss has two young primary school age children, and he was constantly complaining about how many apps he had to have access to, trying to remember the passwords and only having so many devices. And so, as teachers, we get really excited because we find there's a new tool. We know that this is going to meet so-and-so's needs. And because it meets so-and-so's needs, these other kids are going to benefit from it too. So we get excited about using it. So we do have to try and, as teachers, trying to rein it in a little bit and try to say, okay, I've only got so many apps that I'm going to use this year. But at the same time, if you are struggling, if you're a parent and you're struggling, maybe you only have one device to share between your kids, and it's the same device that you're also trying to work from home on. Send teachers an email, don't call them, send them an email, but make sure that you are using polite language. Don't automatically jump on the attack. You have to remember that we're humans too. And what happened when we moved to remote learning, we no longer had that barrier between school and home. And people who are working from home also are having that. But what suddenly happened is we were literally becoming educators 24 hours a day. And we have to figure out a time. I mean, as teachers, we have to put up the barrier as well. So don't expect that we're going to get an answer. Remember that we're going through the same situation that you are. We are trying to manage our kids at the same time. So there's a lot of other things going on. Just remember that we're all human. Yes, we're in the same storm, but we're not all in the same boat. And so you have to think of it that way.
Yes, and just to add to what Sarah is saying, I think that it's important for parents to realize that it's important for them to take charge of their wards or child's education now, and to encourage them as well to take charge and to become independent about their learning. One of the things I encourage my students to do all the time is to take charge of your education. It is yours. And it's an opportunity for you to do so much more with life. And if you take charge of it, you will see that there's a change in your attitude towards it. So one of the things that parents can do is just to encourage their children to be more responsible, be more independent about scheduling their time to do their homework. And as a parent as well, draw up a schedule. You know what your schedule is like. All of your children have a timetable. You determine what are the best times for homework on evenings after school. Maybe determine which subjects you would tackle on which particular days, how you would spend your weekend. You include your downtime, you include chores and all those different things. But it's a matter of you as a parent, or you and your husband or wife or your partner coming together to take charge of the situation, because you understand that it's very fluid and we're all struggling. We're all in this together, but take charge of it. Plan ahead, schedule time, schedule activities, schedule homework, and establish a rapport with your children's teachers. We are humans just like you, as Sarah said. We have families just like you. We understand the struggle. So if you reach out to us, respectfully, if you reach out to us, we will definitely be there to help you as well. So maybe you'll want to suggest some things for us, suggest some things that we can do moving forward. You might have some tips, you might have some suggestions that you might want to offer, some recommendations. We are open to those things as well. But let's establish rapport, reach out, and we can work together.
Yes, I'm really loving these suggestions that you're giving. Like I really like that quote that Sarah said. I don't want to misquote it. She said, we're all in the same storm, but we're in different boats. And I agree. I agree with Rolene as well. We're all in this together. We're in different places. Some of us have different situations, whether it be everyone in the house is using the same device, or maybe they're using different devices. But if we keep those lines of communication open, and like you guys said, if parents are able to keep it respectful, then I believe we all can come to some kind of common ground and we can continue moving our children's education forward. So at this time, I just want to take a quick break to look at the chat. And I want to thank all of you who are joining us this afternoon. I see you, Awela. You said you're watching from Barbados. It is great to have you on the show. I see you guys. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the show. It's nice to have you guys. And remember, get your questions ready. We're going to be moving into that Q&A section a little later down in our show. So get your questions ready for our educators. I know they're chomping at the bit to answer you. So I'm going to go from and actually go into another issue that you guys alluded to a bit earlier. I know you mentioned that some of you had classroom situations where you have like one device, and that one device is being shared with all of the children, and in some cases perhaps even one of the working adults in that household. So how have you, I know Sarah, you are hailing from Bermuda, and Rolene, you're hailing from Barbados as well. So in your individual countries, now that the pandemic has shown up this greater scale with regards to inequalities, how have you found your countries and your ministries of education have been dealing with and battling such challenges in cases where we have students where you have very few devices in the house, you may not even have internet, or in others, we have households where, like you said, Rolene, like children they're happy to be with their family, but they're not necessarily happy to be with them every moment of the day, every waking moment of the day. So in environments like that, how have your individual countries been handling such an issue? Sorry, Sarah, Rolene, my apologies. You can go ahead, and then Sarah, you can follow on from there.
Yes. Well, the Ministry of Education in Barbados has been on a campaign for the last few months to get devices into homes for students, especially. They have provided hundreds of laptops and tablets for students. I do recall just last week that there were some students who received their devices. So that's one way that they have sought to tackle the issue, especially where students have one devices in a home where there are multiple children, or they simply do not have a device at all, or were using their cell phones, which we know aren't adequate enough to tackle the amount of work that they have to do every day. The Ministry of Education has sought to provide those devices for our students. But another thing that we have done, especially before this new lockdown that we have now, initially when the term started, I know that there are some secondary schools who are opening doors for students to come to school on particular days to get work done because they didn't have a device at home, or didn't have electricity, or they may not have had Wi-Fi at home in order to do the work. So I know that the some schools were open for a few students to school to get their work. Some of us have been trying to get students to do their work in books because there are some students who, as I said, have cell phones which aren't adequate enough to cover all of the tasks that they need to do. So we allow them to do their work in their class workbook, take photos of the work and send them to us. We're trying different methods of getting the work done so that all of our students feel as though they can access the education and do not feel left out.
Here in Bermuda, we are fortunately back to face-to-face learning. We were in lockdown from end of February, beginning of March through to the end of the school year. And we were able to, with restrictions, return to school in September, although we did go through one period of remote learning before and after Christmas due to a spike of COVID cases. That said, when we were under the major lockdown last spring, it was fortunate that principals, at least at my school, I believe this was at other schools, principals and deputy principals and guidance counselors were qualified as essential workers. And so for students who did not have access to a device at home, we created work packets, we printed them off, and they were hand delivered to students. And student parents could email, call, whatever. The teacher had access to the teacher as they needed to ask questions, etc. We also had, we have our school website where each teacher had a page and they would post the work for the week on it. We now have added Schoology for the entire Bermuda public school system. And I personally had my own class website where before it was using Google Classroom, and now it's just using a Google website to post links to everything so that students can always have access to the work at that time. Our government has also been endeavoring to put a device in the hands of every student, but we've also found the problem that there just simply aren't enough devices available globally. And so fortunately, we've had some different corporations that have stepped in and donated old devices or have purchased new devices in the last few months. And so they are slowly getting in the hands of our students as well.
It's great to hear that both islands are moving forward, definitely bridging that gap so that everyone is able to get a device is a critical mission. Like you said, Sarah, I'm not sure if by the end of 2021 it will be one that we have completely bridged across the world. I mean, here in Barbados as well, we still have some students that are in need of devices, and I'm sure in Bermuda, like you alluded to, you still have students that are in need of devices as well. But hopefully we can, this is an issue that our respective governments, and I'm assuming governments across the world as well, who are in this pandemic and are dealing with it as well, that we would eventually get to a stage where we are on top of it, and where as much as possible we are giving our students and making sure that our students have that access that they need. So I have another question for you, Sarah. I'm very much curious about this, considering what you just alluded to with your own Google tools and the website. But before I delve into that question, we're going to pause here for a quick break. So after the break, we're going to rejoin and we're going to hear from Sara all about her experience as a Google certified educator and what that process was like. Yes, and we are back. So I'd love to hear from you, Sara, what your experience was like on the journey to becoming a Google certified trainer. And also, you mentioned a lot quite earlier that you are a computer geek of sorts, and it runs in the family. So you can go ahead and tell me what was your inspiration to become a Google certified trainer, and what your experience was like going through your certification.
Well, to go backwards, I came to education just 5 years ago after being a journalist for 15 years. And so I had all of those technology bits in my back pocket. I've been playing on a computer since the 70s, and I know that sounds completely foreign to vast majority of people. But my father was a computer science person. In fact, he had helped in. He used to tell the story. He passed away just 2 months ago from COVID, but he used to tell the story how he got to help install the first ATMs in New York City. So that's kind of the background that we had. One of the things that I've been passionate about is differentiation in the classroom and meeting the needs of a variety of students. Part of that stems from having a child who is twice exceptional, to having students that I need to meet them where they're at and get them excited about their own learning, because they're not even coming from homes where they value education. So working through that. So how I came about becoming a Google certified trainer was kind of unexpected. When we went into lockdown last year, I had started setting up my Google Classroom just before everything started, got all my kids logged into it just before we got sent home. And I had been given a certificate to get my Google Certified Educator Level 1 exam certification. I'd done all the coursework, but never took the test because life got in the way. And so I'm like, suddenly I'm sitting home and I'm a workaholic. So I reviewed all the notes, took test 1, then went on and started. And 2 weeks later, I got level 2. And then opportunity came up for me to take a training course to work towards my Google certified trainer. Now, a trainer's job is essentially to teach other educators how to use technology in the classroom, whether that's through remote learning or face-to-face or hybrid or any of that sort of stuff. And so the process of becoming a Google certified trainer is you do need to have level 1, educator level 1 and level 2. And then you take an assessment as a trainer. So you go through yet a third workshop, online workshop, and take a test. You also then have to give a minimum of 5 training sessions, and you have to log every aspect of them, from pre-assessment, during the lesson, post-assessment at the end of the lesson, and you then complete your application. And in that application, you're analyzing one of those workshops that you've given. It could be a one-on-one, it could be a large group, it doesn't really matter. But then you also have to create a 3-minute video. The first minute is talking about how googly you are, and that's literally the term that they use. And then the second half, the last 2 minutes, is a mini tutorial. So in my video, I talked about myself, my technology background, and I had to take my video and speed up the words, just the sound just a little bit, because I could not get it into the 3 minutes. Was a how to create a digital escape room using Google Forms. So there is a long process. And then once you finish the application and apply, you do have to then commit to ongoing training throughout the year. You have to give at least 12 training sessions per calendar year. They suspended it just for this year because of COVID, but you do have to take a test every year to say that, yes, you know all the updates and et cetera and stuff like that. But it's a pretty cool international, it's a global community that we're constantly talking to each other and feeding off each other and giving each other ideas.
Very nice. Happy to hear your experience. Definitely, it's one that I'm looking forward to having or hearing even more educators and some Barbadian educators as well. I do hail from Barbados, so forgive me for my bias. But yes, it'd be lovely to hear some more Barbadian educators becoming Google certified trainers. The experience sounds interesting, especially with that video. Yes, that sounds like something to look forward to. But just to hop on over to our live chat, I want to take some time to welcome Tamika as well as Kelly to our live show this afternoon. It is a pleasure to have you here. And we are going to move quite quickly into our question and answer segment. We have one question so far, hailing from the chat. And that question is, have you as educators, have you been finding that parents and some of the students as well are reporting that they're having challenges with their electronic devices? I know some parents in Barbados, especially when they were getting wind of the fact that school would be locking down for a period of time and the students would have to be learning from at home. And there was the discussion happening about the new platform they'll be using with Google Suite and Google Classroom. I know there are some parents that rush to purchase devices, but they didn't necessarily check all the boxes with regards to what they should be looking for with a device that their students are going to be using, that their wards and children, I should say, are going to be using from at home. So have you guys been having reports of challenges with the electronic devices because of inferiority? And you can take this one first, Rolene, and then I'll hear from you, Sarah.
I think that there are some challenges that students are facing. There are some students who do not have a working camera in their device. There are students who do not have working microphones, so they're unable to speak during class, so they have to type. There are students whose devices are not adequate enough in terms of space, so I would like, let's say for instance, I would send students particular work to do, maybe on a Jamboard or maybe on Zoom or whatever the case is. Might have class on Zoom and they can't download these apps because they do not have space on the devices. So these are some of the challenges that I hear students complain about weekly, and I think that the issue is Our parents do need training as well. Some students do need training as to how to use these platforms. And I think that getting that training might be a step towards getting or alleviating some of these challenges that parents are complaining about.
I totally agree with Rolene. It's not necessarily that parents are buying junk per se, but that they are just not buying, they don't know what they need, and therefore they're not necessarily buying the right thing. For example, a tablet is a great tool in the classroom, but if an iPad, for example, is an excellent tool in the classroom, but you cannot have two windows side by side. So a student can't be clicked into Zoom and doing the work at the same time. Likewise, Chromebooks are fantastic if you have a steady and stable internet. If you don't have that, you can't access anything because you need to save everything on the cloud or online. You don't have, they come with very, very small hard drives and they have slower processing speeds. So these are all the things that you need to consider and when you're purchasing. If you have any doubt, definitely reach out to your teacher, a teacher, or if the teacher doesn't know, the teacher can reach out to whoever their ed tech person is at their school to give advice. When I get people asking me these things, I suggest that if you're looking for something cheaper, do go with a Chromebook, but go with the largest hard drive that you can find. So that you can have space to save stuff to, and then also teach them how, I teach my students how to access and work offline using Google Chrome, the browser, which you can do that. Otherwise, I strongly recommend that you buy an actual laptop, not a Chromebook, that has a hard drive, that has has a decent processing speed, has the built-in camera and microphone, has a place to plug in a headset, all of those things, and make it a lot easier for your student to function. Oh, and also not a screen that's too small either.
Yes, and I definitely agree with you guys from my own experience as well as a teacher in this virtual environment that we're in. It is a bit of a challenge because I have students who are like, they literally have to log in from multiple devices in order for us to get both audio and visual. So I see the tablet come in and they can do audio on the tablet, but then like you guys alluded to, from the time they start to do any work, the camera on the tablet shuts off, so then they have to go on their laptop to be able to have both that audio and that visual going at the same time. So it is a bit of a hassle, but there is that need. I think definitely there is that need for educating our parents this time so that they know what to get and they can avoid these pitfalls, because I don't think anything hurts as much as after when you have to go back to the parent and say, we're happy that you actually purchased a device for the student, but this device isn't quite allowing them to do all that we would want them to be able to do in order to succeed. So I do definitely agree and understand. So we have a question here. I'm going to try to squeeze this one in. This is from Kelly. She's asking, what tips can you give regarding engaging 3 to 4 year olds, so our infants, within this environment? And she's saying it's a bit tiring with planning around their own abilities and limitations, unlike our older students. So I'm going to give you guys a chance to jump in. Sarah, you look like you're ready to give me an answer, and you, Rolene. So I'm going to go with Sarah, and then we're going to go to Rolene, and we'll end our question and answer segment here for today.
I'm giggling a little bit because I teach primarily middle school and middle school to high school, but I do have a lot of experience with really, really little ones. Basically, when it comes to remote learning with the 3 to 4 year olds, even actually really up to age 6, you are really going to have to consider yourself as a TV broadcaster. Think about yourself as being in children's television, as opposed to thinking of having a classroom like you had at home. You might want to give your parents tips of how to use a giant Ziploc plastic bag with a zipper on it, and to fill it with shaving cream or whatever, so you can use it for writing your letters or sand or dirt or whatever. But you want to remember that your kids only have an attention span of 10 minutes if you're lucky. So you're going to have to interchange, okay, we're going to do 10 minutes of work, then we're going to have a dance party or whatever it takes to get them and then get them back in. And that you really do have to have parental involvement. It's not something that the parents can just sit and, okay, my kid's on the tablet or whatever and watching school. Parent absolutely has to be there, sitting there next to the child at the same time.
And I fully support Sarah there. You need to have the parents involved with you. When it comes to the little ones, like Sarah, my experience is more so with the older ones, but I do have experience working around children. And as Sarah said, the attention span is short. So keep your activity short and pointed, but fun. And be sure that your activities involve them using their body, their hands, their feet. And even if you're going to do something that requires them to sit, maybe tell a story. I remember seeing a colleague of mine who teaches 3 to 4 year olds, and she created her own storybook using, I think it was Adobe Spark, to teach them a particular lesson on, I believe, maybe about kindness or something along the line. But you have to become as creative as possible and think outside the box to reach these students where they are, because you can't be with them. So it means that you have to, one, get the parents involved and think about activities that are, though they are short, they achieve the purpose of not only teaching them whatever lesson it is that you have at the time, or be sure that your objectives are clear, but also be sure that they are all involved in whatever is taking place. So if it's to go outside, and maybe pick up a plant or maybe play in the mud, get the parents involved and get that done. That's one of the things that I can suggest there. Definitely get the parents involved. Keep your activity short, fun, to the point, and explore the different options that are available online for teaching.
Awesome. I think Rolene and Sarah have given you, Kelly, some solid suggestions there on things that you can try. Feel free to try them out during the week and always send us a message back on YouTube telling us how they work, what you found with your 3 to 4 year old. And I just want to take this time to thank Sarah and Rolene for being a part of our show today. They gave us some solid information. And if you want to reach out to our guests, and feel free to follow them on social media, you can see their information below in our description box. And we have come to the end of this, our first episode. Yes. So please look forward to our next episode, which will be the digital classroom part 2. We did mention that this is a 2-part series. And thank you for watching, guys. Enjoy, be safe, and stay STEMmy. Mom and Dad,